combat so you can get to know our warriors. So the first bout will be between Anders the Viking and Sir Timothy of Normandy. So cheer for whichever one you hate the least.
Where's the old idiot gone now?
Why, thank you, Frank.
What your troops have been doing. Obviously, her father as well there around. You know why the RAF crab is This is the run, right? This is the runway. No, this is the runway. Where's Johnny? Where's Johnny? Where's Johnny? Where's Johnny? That's why they're called crabbies. That's why the army calls them crabbies. The navy calls them crabbies.
Dad, do that again.
No.
Last I heard, toys in South Wales. The infantry just started shooting at them about 500 yards. They just got absolutely splattered. So they stopped. Claude Binet's magic bullet changed everything. But that wasn't the only thing. The percussion cap changed arms. Percussion cap works in the rain. You can put a percussion cap on the back of a cylinder. When you put a percussion cap on the back of a cylinder, you've got a repeating handgun in the form of a revolver. Still muzzle loading, but this time I've got Percussion caps. You can't do that with a flintlock. So people say, well, how come I've never heard about percussion locks? Heard about flintlocks. Heard you say they were in use for hundreds of years. Oh God, they were, yes. Why weren't percussion caps? See? One of the guns that's going to be out here today is a Sharps rifle. It's a cartridge loading gun. You still have to put a cap on the outside, but you put the cap. He wanted them also to wear a rudimentary camouflage. He wanted the Dunlop Rubberized Company to rubberize all of their brass buttons so they're black, so they didn't shine. And essentially, they were called sharpshooters. They're not called snipers, they're called sharpshooters. But apart from this splash of green, it's very obvious why these are the blue. The light blue trousers signifies that they are, in fact, conscripts. If they've got dark blue trousers on, which I believe the head sergeant has, then he would have been a regular. The Union Army was very well equipped. To start with, it was a very small force. Both armies were. The other one came out of a militia that was designed to keep internal security from possible rebellions that this side might have been trying to start. And in fact, there was a couple of gentlemen from the north that actually did try and start a couple of rebellions. But the Union started with a mixed bag of uniforms. You can see that there's some frock coats. The gentleman standing by the back of the trench has a frock coat on that comes almost to his knees. There's a New York State militia jacket. The gentleman with the brown hat in the other trench has got on. But actually what happened is these fighting uniforms began to be put aside because the Union troops were issued a sack coat, a simple 4-button sack coat, which was designed for them to do fatigues in. However, the Union cadets were still dressed in grey as well. Some of these guys were regulars who went across who were still dressed in blue. There's a lot of carnage over this. So what they did is they designed their own uniform. They didn't have copious supplies of wool like the North did, so they made a material that was half wool, half cotton. It's called each state. Don't forget the South had ceded to avoid national control. So when Jefferson Davis said this is what we're going to do, some states said no, we want our own uniform. There was some cannon fire now. Some states said we've already got our own uniform and we're not giving you any. So actually it was very difficult to standardise even when they did try. Folks, there's no lapels. It's just a very, very plain jacket. The gentleman here who's given the orders has got one on. Very, very simple. And they've actually got shorter as well to save material. Now I mentioned the fact that you saw the Napoleonics doing something very similar, and this is exactly what I was talking about when I said nobody got the memo. They started off the war fighting this Napoleonic War with these new weapons. And of course these new weapons had 5 times the range that the old weapons did. And the results were fairly catastrophic. If you marched up to a group of guys, they didn't wait for you to get to 50 yards, they started killing you at 500. Now the weapons that are actually in use, I'll tell you a little bit about them. The most common single model is the Patton 58 Enfield, made in England. And it's a 5.77 rifle, fired with a soft lead ball, and it's been paired up with 2 Springfield rifles, the 61 and the 63. They're 58 caliber, but in soft lead ammunition it doesn't make that much difference. And there's 700,000 of them, making a total of 1.4 million. Now the problem with this old-fashioned way of doing things is if you had defenders that flood you in the trench, it doesn't work very well if you walk up and fire a volley, because they all just stick their heads down, wait for you to fire at them, stick their heads up and shoot you. So, firing by file... Oh, they're going forward. I thought they were going to file by file, but the Major changed his mind. Something else. Now we've had to shorten the ranges that they would have had this engagement at considerably to make this work, because this would have been about 4 times the ranges that we're actually having it at, but that way it doesn't work for you guys, you can't see everything. You know I said about the various states having different issues? The unit on the right there, they've got English issue blue trousers. Not grey, not brown, but English issue blue trousers. And they've got steel grey, or steel blue, commutation jackets as well. I don't know if you can see the smoke ring above the arena there, that's quite fantastic. But that should give you an indication of the sheer volume of air that cannon shifted. Even, that's perfect actually, that's a photo, isn't it, right there? But that, wow. That should give you an indication that even though we're not actually putting cannonballs down these today, any of these are real black powder weapons, firing real black powder, and you know, you can actually get hurt if you stand in front of these. There are very strict rules to do with these. They're firing by rank over here, and that way they are firing every 10 seconds rather than once every 20 seconds. There's a better way of doing it called firing by file, which is where you all take it in turns to fire, and they're doing classic volleys. They're doing some very good volleys, actually. If you have a volley that's fired, and it sounds like one musket firing, that's a really, really good volley. The Union one sounded like a bit like da-da-da-da-da, but the one that was fired here was really good. If you do hear a really good volley, by the way, give them a round of applause, because it's quite hard to do. The worst thing about this was these were 58 caliber or 58 caliber musket balls, billy bullets, soft lead. So when they hit the human body, they do terrible things. They're not like a jacketed bullet. They begin to frangulate. They squash, they pop open, and if they hit you in an arm or a leg, they just tear it off. There's nothing left. If they hit you in anywhere else, it's not looking good. Medics at the time, I mentioned this in the Napoleonics, where Florence Nightingale came across. This is you ladies that done this. Well, during this war, Mark Bickersdyke began to clean up the act. Because this war, 2/3 of the casualties were from diseases and bad medical attention. And the Christian Commission and the Sanitary Commission led the way in reducing that. That, ladies and gentlemen, was the sister. So what happened there was the cannon was loaded with effectively a big tin of musket balls. Turned it into a massive shotgun. For that weapon was used as final defensive fire. But the ladies changed everything. They began to cut the casualties down, and also medical assistance began to become something. Clara Barton established the American Red Cross. And most importantly, and I mentioned this earlier, the neutrality of medics. So doctors were considered neutral. Field hospitals were just field hospitals. The beginning of the war, the Confederates had some astounding victories. And they were actually going for a shock and awe victory. It didn't quite happen, but they were. They had 4 million people to draw upon because it was 9 million people in the South. Sorry, 5 million. 4 million of them, however, were slaves, which left 5 million. Slave owners, if you owned more than 20 slaves, didn't have to fight. And some states were not doing conscription anyway. Okay, jump over to the north. In the north, they began conscription. They had 21 million to draw from. If you were rich, however, you could pay a substitute. So the cry, rich man's war, poor man's fight, came about. But the Union never actually called for the people it could have done. The Confederacy tried to, but in the end, its own states' rights began to get in the way. And in fact, towards the end, 2 states even threatened to secede from the Confederacy. The Union, however, suffered several major losses, and British and French intervention was about to actually intercede in the war and stop it. When the Battle of Antietam happened, it was a major Union victory. It was a very costly one, but it gave Abraham Lincoln the means to put the Emancipation Proclamation into place. Now, there's many reasons why he'd have done this and freed the slaves in the states hostile to the Union, but the main and overriding reason is it immediately took British intervention in the war out. See, while you had a slaveholding South versus an uncaring North, that was kind of okay. The minute that the North was anti-slave, as Britain was, then the British Prime Minister could not support the South. International support dried up, and basically after that, we get USS Grant, who literally says, fight them every day. You can lose every battle if you want. They will run out of men before we do. That's pretty much how the whole thing ends. The Union are falling back there. The Confederates were the first to actually realise the value of defensive works, and the fact that these new weapons made these defensive weapons, made these new weapons even more powerful. In fact, one of their generals is called Stonewall Jackson for that very reason. He realised the value of a stone wall, and he held off a much greater force by using the stone wall against volley fire. That was a pretty good volley as well. These guys are good.
Here they are, boys! Run back to Washington, boys!
They are really in a corner now. I don't think that this is going to end well for our Union boys. Would you like to see our Union boys escape, ladies and gentlemen? Would you like to see the Confederacy win? Alright, I'll tell you what, if you'd like to see the Confederacy win, let's have a big shout.
Hard, boys!
If you'd like to see the Union win, let's have a big shout. Oh, it's quite close. That's way closer than I thought it was going to be. It's normally one way or the other.
For your wife, you sweethearts, boys! Load and shoulder! Load and shoulder! Load and shoulder, first platoon!
There's a lot more musketry on the field as well than there was during the Napoleonic battle. And because of that fact, and the fact that these fire a little bit quicker, and the fact we've got cannons, you can very clearly see the amount of smoke that's generated, even on a dry, windy, fairly windy. So that's some breeze coming today. Oh dear, he's looking bad there. Imagine that this was a colder day, imagine there was no wind, and imagine there was water about in the air, a bit of moisture. Then that smoke would hang, it would hang very heavily. And in fact, you wouldn't be able to see anything. So the fog of war really does apply here. I think that the sharpshooters are trying to keep the door open, if you like. The Union cannon crew there, still working away. You can tell a cannon crew, by the way, because even just by looking at them, the Union infantry has blue flashings to its uniform. The artillery has red. And I can say this today because they're not here. The cavalry, of course, has yellow, because there's a streak of yellow in every cavalryman. Oh, that was a bit damp. That did not go off as intended. That actually hung fire a little bit there. Should go bang. So when it goes like woof woof, that's gone off a little bit. That, by the way, is what happens also when the powder is damp. That's how it's meant to sound. Now you see it's changed because now they've come out of this set of defences and they've allowed the Union to occupy some defences.
Artillery off! You're in charge.
Hey! Reload! Damn it, I missed it.
That one was shell. The three types of ammunition that are fired from these cannon are shot. That's just a simple shot, like a ball, and it's designed like an armour-piercing round to go through a side of a ship or a defence or a door, but it's not very good against the line of infantrymen because it just goes through one or two of them and carries on its merry way. So they've got one called shell, which is hollow, and it's got a fuse at the back, and when you fire it... Now they're charging bayonets now. Now, oddly, during the American Civil War, people taught bayonet drill just the same as they did in modern warfare. But less than 2% of all injuries of the American Civil War were from bayonets. Less than 2%. Even worse, the Sharps rifles don't have bayonets because they're sharpshooters. I think they're a little bit confused. There is also another factor here. I don't know if you can see this, but there's a safety thing going on here, which is why there's been a slight pause and why people have been very, very wary. These cannons are real, and sometimes they misfire. This one has. So you'll see that the rods are placed in front of the cannon across it on an X, which means the gun is loaded in a dangerous condition, which is why they haven't marched at it, which is why they have stayed out of the cone of its fire. So that's why they rather oddly shifted across. Because despite the fact that we enjoy giving you a really good battle performance, we like to do so safely, and there are many hidden safety cues within the battle. And it looks like a Union surrender. So the Union Army surrendering there. The saddest thing about this war, of course, that it killed 600,000 Americans. That's 1 in 50. If you think of all the people that you know, and then you take one of them away very suddenly, that's probably about right. And don't forget, that happened to everybody. Did somebody decide to run? Yeah. Not only that, but of course, most of these regiments were raised from small towns. So once the war was over, if they got half their regiment blown away and then they amalgamated with another, by the end of it, there was no young men left in that town. And that could happen. It could. Deer Iron Main lost its fishing industry because of that, and it happened to a lot of towns. And also, the worst thing was, these are all Americans, and a lot of the people on both sides are related. There's a huge amount of accounts of people actually ending up charging. There's a famous one of a Confederate lieutenant who goes onto a Union ship after they've poured fire onto the deck crew and finds that he's killed his own son. So this happened a lot. These are all Americans. They're just going to make this gun safe. There we go, gun is safe. And they're using the opportunity. Oh dear. Nice one, guys. And with that, we are clear on the battlefield. Ladies and gentlemen, can we have a round of applause for our Confederacy today? And can we have a round of applause for our defeated Union? And can we have a round of applause for our cannon crews who worked very hard to keep us all safe? And they do add a lot, don't they, those cannon crews? I'm going to ask my favourite bit here. I said, will the dead of the battlefield please arise? I got told off once, by the way, when I said that, because actually a lady came to me and she said, you shouldn't say things like that. I'm a very religious person. So I told her I played Dungeons and Dragons again, and now she doesn't talk to me.